Welcome to She Loves the Grid, where we discuss all things F1. Whether it's happening on the track, in the paddock, or beyond the grid, we'll talk about it all.
Hi, I'm Diane.
And I am Claire.
Welcome to She Loves the Grid this week. We've got a lot to talk about as far as racing goes, but Claire, how was your week?
It was good. It was busy. I did take some time off because, as you know, I relocated to Germany from the US at the beginning of February. And last week, it was about a week ago, all of our stuff finally made it through customs. So I took the time
Yay.
off to unpack and make our flat, because that's what they call them here, our home. So that's why last week you saw computers show up and now everything looks normal.
Yay. That's a really good feeling to finally feel settled, especially moving to a new country. Like
Oh, yeah.
finally feeling like you are around your own items and your own things. That's huge.
Yeah. Well, my son dances at Walt Disney World, and my foyer looks like Disney vomited all in it because there's just all my memorabilia in the foyer. So it's kind of funny, but it feels like home. So
I think that's awesome. You're gonna have to hit up Disney Paris now that you are
absolutely,
in Europe.
absolutely. How about
Yeah.
your week?
Pretty quiet for the most part. Just loving it's warming up here. I'm in Arizona for those of you that are new, and it's starting to warm up today. I think it's supposed to be 82. We've had a really cool winter, very cold winter. And even this time of year, we've been way under our normal, average temperatures. So it's finally gonna warm up a little bit for at least the next few days. We'll go back down to the 70s. But compared to you guys, I mean, we're having a tropical heat wave over here.
Because normally, because I lived there 18 years. Normally, that's March is where you're already hitting triple digits. I can't believe it
Yeah.
hadn't hit triple digits yet.
Nope. I'll take it. Well, let's postpone that heat for
Well,
now.
in Celsius, we're hitting double digits tomorrow.
Okay, mentally, I would be thinking it's going to be freaking hot, but how much is it really going to be?
I just did the conversion. We're going to get into the 50s tomorrow.
Yeah. See, the triple would throw me off.
But I might be able to go a day without wearing thermals, so that'll be good because I've lived in heat all my life, so I'm having to get used to cold weather.
Yeah.
But it's
Oh,
been
for sure.
snowing. That's
For
been
sure
crazy.
for you. And when we come out in May, the end of May, because we're going to Barcelona to see the Grand Prix there at the first weekend in June, I'm hoping that it's a little bit warmer. I'm sure it will be. It's the end of May. It'll be your summer, but
It will be. It'll be
yeah,
nice. It'll be nice. Well,
absolutely.
time to talk about that first race. That first race. That was
Yeah, lots of drama right after the first race. It was
yeah.
so interesting to watch not only fans comments like the sky is falling down. I think you had said that when we were chatting earlier, like the sky is falling down. um but most interesting to me was the social media for the teams. It was so interesting, and we're going to kind of go through some things that we either learned or didn't really touch on last time because we recorded the podcast literally minutes after the race ended. And so there were some things we didn't touch on, we kind of forgot to include. But I kind of want to start with McLaren because we all know they did not have a fabulous race at all. Their qualifying, not bad. The race, terrible. And I thought it was kind of sad and interesting that their social media admin almost immediately, I think the caption started, this was a race to forget. It's like, that is harsh. Like, that is so
Right. I mean,
harsh.
you can't have it good all the time, and
No.
it's just. But then again, their CEO. I mean, he's an interesting person, and I'm trying to be tactful, And
Yeah.
you've got some stuff there, but as you go through it, it's just to me, it sounded like all he's doing is blaming the car issues. But
Yeah.
is that what you're there for? Is to create a great car for your drivers? I
Right.
mean, you've got a couple of quotes from him, right?
Yes. Yeah. So he did comment that Oscar, he retired after I think it was the 15th lap. So due to an issue, electrical issue. So that's what he said about
Hard.
that. And then for Lando, he said that it was a pneumatic pressure issue on the power unit, and that was forcing Lando to basically pit every 10 laps to recharge the system. And then, another quote that he had was just Bahrain wasn't good enough. Duh. Like it wasn't.
No, car issues. That their job and it's his job to make sure.
Yes.
Isn't he the one that's like CEO and principal, right? So
no, he's not principal. Andrea is their principal.
That's
but
right.
But to me, he acts like a principal. You thought he was the principal because he's everywhere, right? Like he is so prominent as far as CEOs go. He's always in the paddock. He's, making comments, has obviously his own Instagram page, but my thought on that is they had the least number of laps completed in testing. You knew there were issues. And granted, you can't fix all of those issues in a week, but still, I still think it's a little harsh to be like, that was a race to forget. Yeah, maybe it was, but let's try to be a little bit more positive, right? There goes my mic. There goes. So that was McLaren. Ferrari, one thing we didn't talk about last week was how Charles had replaced his energy store and the control electronics prior to the race. So we'll go into this a little bit more on a non-racing week. We'll talk about how many changes they can make to things like their power units and that sort of stuff without incurring a penalty. So for the items that Charles switched out, you get to do 2 free changes before you get a penalty. And again, we won't go too far into that now, but a penalty usually is you might finish, say, second in qualifying, but you get a 10 grid penalty. So you start 11th, right? So that's where the penalty comes in. So you really don't necessarily want to be using up one of your 2 free changes on the first race. So there was that.
Yeah, and then that's crazy. I was reading an article about that when you mentioned it. It's like it says you get 2 of those the whole season. There's 23 races this season. So
yeah,
you've changed it once already. It must have been really bad to do that.
Right?
To make him think he needed to.
Exactly. And he still didn't finish the race. So Fred said that, they need to do a full investigation, but it was not the engine itself that was an issue, but an accessory. We don't know what exactly accessory that was, but that's where he's at. But Ferrari did have an all-team meeting, like a lot of teams. Again, here comes the drama. The sky is falling down. Let's get everybody together at headquarters. The drivers are in their fancy little Ferrari suits, which I love. They look so dapper in those. But I don't.
Fashion and Diane's favorite team, of course.
Exactly. An Italian fashion. Those are all Italian made. So right up my alley. So I don't think I've seen anywhere what was specifically said at that meeting, but they did have an all hands on deck meeting. Publicly, the other thing that Fred said is that they need to work on tire management and reliability. Again.
Yeah. Again, these are like those things that I know I'm new as a fan and getting to know everything about F1, but tire management seems to be like a given that every team, that's a basic, right? That's something every team has to deal with. So
exactly.
Okay.
Clearly want a reliable car, right? Like you want a reliable car. Didn't really have that last year at Ferrari at different points throughout the season. So
and parts falling off of it during
right. Not so good. Aston Martin, though, kind of was a little, I would say, definitely on the positive side. So, they had a great first race. We talked about it last week. But one thing I did want to highlight was Papa Stroll. And if you're new to our podcast, that is what I just call Lance's dad. Lawrence is Papa Stroll. So during their launch, he said they had a 5-year plan to be in a place where they were fighting for championships. And already people are like, they're already there. They're up there. They're the third fastest car, or yeah, third fastest car in the first race. They're already there. What more can they do? Like they are ready to be in the mix and fighting it up. So I mean, good for them, but one race.
So much on this, like in the opposite of the sky is falling and panicking. Don't put all your eggs in one basket in week one either, right? It's like it's just week one. It's just week
Exactly.
one.
It's
It's
just
great,
week.
but it's just week one, man. It's just week one.
Exactly.
But
And this is why I think well, I don't know if he is your favorite principal, but you mentioned him on our last podcast. But the Aston Martin principal, Mike Crack, I read an article that he did an interview for, and he just seemed so grounded. Because, like
I
you
like
were
that.
just saying, it's week one. He was saying, even during the race, did I think we were going to get a podium? He said, I mean, not really. Anything can happen. Anything can happen during that race. Somebody could hit you, your engine can blow up. Like there's so many things. So he just, let's take it one step at a time.
Your
Let's
own
just
teammate could hit your other teammate,
on lap one. Yeah. these things happen. So I liked that he kind of had that ground. He wasn't fully buying into that hype train. We've got a long season to go. He said, we're not on the same level as Red Bull, but we're improving. So we should all be like Mike Crack. Like,
We
let's
should.
just.
We should. He also is, easy on the eyes. So
Well, there's that too.
good for that.
Maybe
So.
that's telling about us, as most people are talking about the drivers, and we're like checking out the principals.
We're taking the principles.
And it's funny too, because like I said last time, I never noticed him before. I mean, I just earlier during testing the lot, nothing.
I don't know what it is. And those who are listening and watching, I have an affection or an attraction toward the lower half, and just if you're watching
the backside, maybe, or
the backside,
to say the full lower half
profile. Just watch that profile. Is all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. All right, we'll get off that. Okay.
It made me look.
Now, not that they need to, we need to hype them up too much, but Red Bull, we were talking and you were saying how well, talking about tires, it's kind of the flip on Mercedes or Ferrari talking about how they need to work on that tire management. Talk about a team that just had it down, right?
They really did. I mean, I think both Max and Checo just used 2 sets of soft tires. Nobody else, I mean, there were some teams having a hard time managing the hard tires. So they definitely, there's something in how they're managing their tires, how they're working those. I think there's something magical in the changes they made to their floor that have really, in that first race, just elevated them. So we'll see how that translates on other courses this year, but they got.
I think that would be a neat topic for us to cover in our on our grid basics section sometime. Is just talking about tires, and the differences and what we mean by hard and medium. I noticed in the beginning of one of the races or one of the pre coverage that F1 TV was doing, they were talking about Pirelli has 5 different versions for this year. And like this race, there was 3 that they could choose from. So I think it would be neat to cover that when people understand the differences of those.
Yeah, I think we definitely should. I know it's something I, should delve into more because they have new intermediates this year. And I think there's new wets to have less spraying. So if it is raining, which it does happen at least once a year, they will have less spray coming off where visibility won't be as difficult. So yeah, I mean, I think Red Bull will be mum, but I think those are 2 things that are clearly magical for them after the first race.
Yeah, and I think that'd be educational for everybody too, and just to understand why they changed the tires and how important that is to a race and that tire management, how few they have. Because I also read that they were talking about limiting the number of tires, a possible change and whatnot. So I think that's those kinds of things. Yeah. It's interesting how that works and how that keeps the competition, equal, but how strategy is so important, right? And how the strategy and how the mechanics of the car and the engineering of the car is important too, because it's the wear of the tire, the race, the track, all of that comes into, it makes it so much more technical than it's just a car driving around on the road, right? There's so much more to it.
Exactly. No, I think it's so important. Everybody needs to be watching, figuring out what Red Bull's doing. Get underneath that car and look at that floor.
Yeah. Well, I know we had next was Williams. Williams. It's almost like a sweetheart story how just this race can't bank it all on first race, but they had some pretty cool numbers this one, right?
They really did. So one number that jumped out to me this week was that in terms of lap time gained year over year, they had the biggest jump of any team. And they went up like 2.378 seconds faster. So that's a lot, especially this year when you've got teams that are, within a nanosecond basically of each other in qualifying. To gain that much speed is really, really exciting for them. And they definitely had their best start in the past 6 years. So I think
That's
that's exciting. Very
yeah,
exciting for them.
yeah, that's more years than the TV series that Netflix has been covering
Yeah.
too. So that's massive. And you said we looked at the results, which we failed to mention there at the beginning too, that just to kind of update where we were a little off right after the race. But Logan from Williams got the fourth fastest time.
Yeah, he sure did. Which is so exciting. Again, the rookie, had the
Yeah,
fourth fastest time. I think that's really exciting for him and for them as a team. Alex, I think, has had his highest finish since he's been with them, maybe even in F1. But they also said that like on the straight line, they're very fast, but Williams believes that they have a more complete package than their car last year. So they are actually excited to see, okay, we saw how it performed in Bahrain, which is a very abrasive track. They are excited to see how their car performs as we, hit some of these other tracks where there's, faster turns or, different things. So they're really excited about what they saw. And frankly, I am too.
yeah, me too, me too. Now, before we get into the biggest drama of the week,
Yes.
I do want to mention we mentioned how Logan was one of the rookies who got at the fourth fastest time. Pierre got second. And then because we were talking at the end of last week, we thought he might have gotten the fastest, and it wasn't. He was second, but it was actually Joe, right? That's his name. Joe. I'll get his name right eventually. He got
You will get it.
So he got
Joe
the
won you. Yeah, he did have the fastest lap, which when I heard that, I was like, yeah, good for you. I love to see that. I think granted, he was the only rookie last year, but I think he had a pretty solid season. And, especially for his first time out. So I'm really excited for him to get that fastest lap.
Beating his teammate, the other rookie, which was not up there, but it was pretty cool to see two rookies in the top four for fastest lap.
Yeah. I think that was it. I think it was very exciting. But like you said, the drama of the week. So listen.
Panic. Why we named this episode Week 1 Panic. Oh my gosh.
Mercedes was losing their mind almost immediately after the race. Actually, probably pretty immediately after the race. The negative talk was starting. George, what did he say? Like Red Bull could very well win all 23 Grand Prix. So
why do you
after one race, you're just handing them all of the wins? I mean, how boring is that going to be? First of all, second of all, with that attitude, might as well just let him win. Like
you're not going to. I mean, a lot of what you do in life and how you accomplish, attitude feeds so much into it. If you're already just letting go, how are you going to be able to put your best foot forward out there if you already have set yourself up that you're not going to be able to beat them, right? Because you've already set yourself down. And your teammate. You're putting little faith in your teammate, Lewis. Come on.
The entire team, like all your engineers, everybody else, like you just threw him under the bus. Toto, I don't think was much better because he said something to the effect of it being one of the worst races in history. Dramatic much? Like your team, you finished 5th and 7th in the very first race. That was the worst race in history? I'm not seeing it at all. Lewis, after the race, was pretty positive. He knows that there's things that they have to work on. But later in the week, it came out where Lewis had said he knew the first time he drove that car that there were issues and it needed some work. So that to me confirmed like the rumors from the shakedown when he and George were out, doing the little shakedown. There were rumors already coming out that the car was not performing the way they wanted it to. There were issues. And, for me, I wasn't really listening to it. I was just kind of like, okay, whatever. But to me, with that quote from Lewis, I think he was confirming it. So every day I'm opening up social media and multiple times a day, the Mercedes Instagram and their Facebook is all drama. Like, we know we can do better. We have to do more. By Friday morning, it was the first thing I saw. I was like, I'm over it. Stop it. Stop.
It was practically every day you would see something, some kind of, and the fans, I mean, their fans were not helping. Their fans were just kind of, because that negativity breeds negativity, right?
Absolutely.
And if you can't bring out the positive, then your fans are just going to eat it up. I mean, we've seen social media, right? It's just a negative, full breeding ground. And if you can't get out there and do it, then it's just going to just go nuts. And that's what happened, which I think what happened at the end of the week.
But I do think, before I say, like, it was a vicious cycle because Mercedes is putting out there, like, basically, oh, we're terrible. We have so much work to do. And then the fans are feeding into it and then vice versa. So, where are you going to go with that? But crazy. Was it yesterday? It just seems so long ago. Then came the open letter to the fans from Mercedes with literally 3 points. They did first, second, third, different paragraphs. Like, this is how we're going to do it. And when I first read it, I thought, oh, for crying out loud, like, this is so dramatic. And I was reading it. I'm like, they literally here's our 3 points. First, we're going to do this, second, this, third, this. But then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, this is an organization that is used to winning. This last year was the first year they hadn't won the constructors in ages. So even though they finished 5th and 7th, their standards are so high. They have these awesome drivers in George and Lewis who have high expectations, who should be, competing at the front with the Red Bulls and the Aston Martins and the Ferraris. And I kind of get it. And I feel like they were trying to be transparent, and they know that these are the issues and these are the steps that we're going to take to fix them. We will definitely be seeing changes probably this coming week, but especially as we go on. But I think the thing that really stood out to me was their third point was, we need our fans to support us. Like you were saying, the fans were going crazy, and they were saying, we need the fans to support us. We need you to be with us, and we're not going to tolerate, bad, talk, I don't know, discrimination of any kind or hatred of any kind towards us, towards our competitors, towards, anything in F1. So you can either join us or we'll part ways, and that's okay. So
yeah, I thought it was interesting. The first time I read it, I was like, well, wait a minute. This almost sounds like a company telling its employees something. It's kind of hard you can't control fans. I mean, they're fans, right? I mean, these are individuals that you have no control over. Yeah. And I mean, then I could see where they were coming from. I mean, you've got to protect people. It's a hard place. It's a hard place to be when you're a B2C, business to consumer kind of business, right? Right. But when they have their own people who were leading the charge of the negativity, right? So like we were saying on our Instagram, where we really enjoy some of the drivers putting out funny things and whatnot on their stuff. I really enjoy that the racers can do that. They're not limited. They're not stopped. And it's really them. They don't have somebody doing it for them, because you get to see their personalities. But there's a little bit of that needing to help rein some of that in, to say, well, when you're doing it, we want you to say how you really feel, but you might want to think first before you just out there and say something like, oh, well, Red Bull's just going to win it all. Yeah. I mean, I know you're speaking from the heart and your hurt and it's emotions, but once it's out on the internet, man, it's out there forever, and people just jump on it, right? So I don't know if it's immaturity, if it's just that raw emotion that came out, that was just a tough one. And that was, I read that all the drivers are required to speak to the media.
Mhm.
So they need some media training
Yeah.
to make sure to kind of help with that like raw emotion kind of thing, because that's
Yeah,
tough.
and
It's a tough
the
place to be
interesting
in.
thing is I think both George and especially Lewis are really good at their media.
Yeah.
Projecting a very positive, not giving too much away, but connecting with the fans. So it was really surprising to me to hear that that's what George said. And so maybe to your point, it was just the frustration that he finished seventh. But also there's what 13 guys behind you. So like
And you
that's
got
even worse.
points. I mean, you
Yeah.
still got points
You got
and
points. You both got points. Ferrari didn't get points. Like,
yeah,
there's a whole bunch of
come
teams
on,
that didn't.
right. Exactly.
So
Ferrari did not both get points. And that's just that's
yeah.
a like you look at it that way and you both got points and to have that many of 20 drivers, 10 teams, and not and have two of you statistically to be able to get
Yep.
both into the top 10 and get points, looking at the positive.
Yep. And that's the thing. I think the bottom line with the Mercedes thing is I just thought one, it was so overwhelming every day, multiple times a day, these posts coming out. And then it was flip-flopping, like, we're gonna do it. We're all in this together. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. I'm so exhausted by the drama that you are creating. So I think there's a way to acknowledge what happened in the race, that you weren't exactly thrilled with the way it turned out, even though you finished, both drivers in the top 10, but also say, like, we have things that we know that we need to work on, but
It's
now we're
just
going to
week
focus on the
one,
positive.
and
Yeah,
it's just week one.
exactly. So that's my question for you is all of this stuff that's been going on after the first week, so not just with Mercedes, so the fans, the commentators, the teams, was the impact or the aftermath just too dramatic, whether it was positive or negative? Was it too dramatic? Was it like Aston Martin is going to win? They're going to be on the podium all the time. Or, Ferrari's never going to, they're terrible. Our season's over. Fix your engine. I mean, was it all too much? Like you said, this is the first race. We have 22 more races to go. What do
Yeah,
you think?
I think it's too much. I mean, I've not been around long enough and followed it enough to see, but there's statistically, it is you can't base anything off the first one. If the whole Bahrain curse is true, Max is going to have a crappy season the rest of the season, right? So you just never know, right? And I think it's like it's one of those things we have to play it race by race and see what happens. And the key is the right attitude, the right effort, and if each team goes in and learns race by race and works to improve, that's how they get better. But in dwelling and doing the whole sky is falling and just setting themselves up that this race sets precedence for the rest.
Right.
No, it's what you do with it, right? I think with everything
Exactly.
in life, it's what you do with it. You've got to learn and try to get better. Um, it'll be interesting to see this one and then see where we're at the end and how it stacked up, right? Are we eating our words or
Right.
did it
But
really?
to your point, if you compare after the first race, the constructor standings and who has the most points, well, last year, Red Bull and McLaren after race one had 0 points. Zero. And then Red
Yeah,
Bull last year ended up winning the constructor. McLaren was fighting for fourth place. So I think right there, it kind of shows you like this is not the be all end all. And I know that there are a lot of new fans and there's a lot more, I think, social media and stuff out there. And yes, content creators, you need things to talk about. But I do think that there just seemed to be so much put on, good or the bad, after one race. Just way too much
and
for
sometimes
me.
it's just it's what happened and you've got to they've got to just the point is learning from it and fixing it and moving on, right?
Yeah.
Not dwelling. So I think that's with life in general, right? If you can't dwell, you got to fix it and
Yeah.
and get past it, learn from it. And that's the problem. I think what I could see in some of the frustrations, the ones I think it was Lewis was talking about, we knew there's problems last year and there continues to be the same problems. That's when you have a problem, right?
Right.
That's when as you're not fixing those problems that continue to happen. And if it is the same problem, race after race, year after year,
Yep.
and that's not being addressed, that's when you have a problem, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's with any business. That's anything in life, right? You've got to fix that kind of thing versus, just freaking out because one race fell apart.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, back to the drawing board for them.
All right. Well, just wait one. Maybe we can next week not be talking about a whole bunch of drama. I mentioned it earlier. It called Grid Basics. I think we talked about trying to do some education and stuff. So we'll go to a little segment called that Grid Basics. And you came up with a great idea to talk about qualifying. 'Cause we were talking a little bit about that last week and how qualifying works. And so I'm gonna let you do all that. And there's qualifying, and we'll talk just a regular qualifying, what we saw
Yes.
last week.
Yeah, so we're just going to talk about regular qualifying today because we know that there's sprint, right? We have 6 sprint races this year. Last year we had 3. So there's a different kind of format to that sort of race weekend. So when we get to the week before Azerbaijan, which is the end of April, we'll talk about sprint races and how that format works. And it also came out this week that F1 is considering doing a different type of qualifying before the race at Imola. So when did we say Imola was? May,
yes.
May, early May, I think. So prior to that race, we'll get some more information about how that qualifying is going to look and what that's going to look like. So I have to just say, if you're watching us on YouTube, there's already a little thing going because Claire has different color drink glasses that she uses throughout our podcast. And I never noticed this until somebody sent a message and said, you should start a drinking game as to which color glasses Claire going to pick up, or like what color glasses does she have? What's in the drinks? So,
I perpetually have dry mouth, so always having to drink something. I'm going either between my cold soda, diet soda, or my warm green tea, so mint green tea. So
yes. So those of you not watching us on YouTube, she's got a blue glass and then kind of a clear blue glass with a blue tint to it. So I had to, if you're listening to us on a podcast, you didn't see her pick up her drink and take a sip, but it just reminded me about the message that we got. So, okay. So anyways, here's how qualifying works during a normal race week. So qualifying happens on Saturday. We have our 2 practices on Friday, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, or the evening, as in last week. On Saturday, we have a practice in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we have qualifying. And qualifying, I would say, is kind of like a knockout stage kind of qualifying. There's 3 different stages. So the whole premise in each stage is you complete as many laps as you need to get your fastest time. So you will see, and we talked about this a little bit last week, but you will see that some cars, they're not coming out right away. You'll see some of the slower teams out first. You have in Q1 18 minutes to set the fastest time that you possibly can. If you're way up there, say, I think last qualifying, Charles was up or Carlos was up near the top, and he went back to the pits. He doesn't need to be out there. You can beat my time. I'm not going to drop down. So what we're looking for in those first 18 minutes is each driver setting the fastest lap they possibly can. And after that time has expired, the 5 slowest drivers with the slowest lap times are eliminated. You're done for the day. Goodbye. Thank you for participating. And only 15 drivers move on, right? So they give a little bit of time in between, in part because what we have noticed is the lap limits are in play when you're qualifying. And we talked about this a little bit last week, but if you exceed those track limits, I think I said lap limits, track limits, your qualifying time can be eliminated. It can be taken away. So there were times last year where the stewards, after the qualifying session ended for Q1, as our example, other people were getting out of their cars, pushing their cars into the garages. And then the stewards come back and said, oh, wait a second. Somebody who was moving on to the top 15 just had their track time deleted. So now you're back in. they're out, you're in. And so then the drivers have to get back in the car, get back in. So I started to see towards the end of last year and then this year, they're maybe waiting. If they're on that bubble, they might wait. Somebody in the bottom 5 might wait a little bit to see, like, okay, the steward's good. Did anybody have a track time deleted? So then we move on to Q2. Go ahead.
I was going to interrupt for a second because I read too that whether they're practicing or qualifying, they have to be in full gear. They have to have their full helmet, fire gear, the neck, everything. So they have to be fully dressed, fully decked out. So I understand why they would sit and wait, because that's a lot of gear to put on.
Absolutely.
To have to take off and put back on if they would do that. So that makes sense.
That too. And getting all strapped in, and you're like, right, you're comfy in your seat, you get out, you got to get it all back together.
For them, right? That car is set for them. But I didn't realize that till during like the liveries and whatnot, when Ferrari was showing off their car, since they did it on their track and they only had the one car. When the two racers switched out, they had to have time because they had to move the seat to adjust it to the drivers because they're so different in height. Yeah. So again, because that box, that area inside is fit just, if you really pay attention to the cams, like their hands just barely have enough room, to move around. So
yeah,
it's really fascinating. I love being able to point out these little extra tidbits that I'm noticing the more I watch.
But that's good, because those little things are still very important, right? So, okay, so once we've gotten rid of the 5 slowest in Q1, the 15 remaining cars move on to Q2, and they have 15 minutes. So we're 3 minutes less, 15 minutes. And again, it's get out there and you want to get the fastest time that you possibly can in those 15 minutes. So, if you're already seeing, maybe you're a Red Bull and you're already seeing like, we're okay. Our car is this much faster so far. We might not go out on track right away. But you want to do that. So at the end of those 15 minutes, again, 5 slowest drivers with the 5 slowest times are out. They're done for the day. Then we come back, a little bit of a break, come back for Q3. That's every driver's goal. You all want to be moving on to Q3, but you only have 10 drivers that move on to Q3. And now you have 12 minutes to get the fastest lap. And I think this is where you might have some teams that, don't come out on track right away. They might allow a minute or two to lapse. You might see some going straight back to the pits, maybe refining something, getting their tires warmed up, whatever it is. But I think generally, not last qualifying, you will see them going until the very last second. And they might come into the pits for a little bit and get back out there with just enough time to do a warm up and then hit that start line right before time cancels out, before it's done. Right. So at the very end of that, we know who has gotten pole, because the driver with the fastest time overall is our pole sitter. They start in the first place. So that could be, on the inside. Sometimes I think it's on the outside, but that's where you want to be the fastest driver of the day. You want to be on that front row in that front position. One thing I do want to point out is after each qualifying stage, you're starting all over. It's not like you're carrying over your time from Q1 into Q2. You're starting all over. That is very important to point out. Should have mentioned that when I was going through the different stages, but that's important to point out. Your time starts over. So once we've gone through that, we know who our pole sitter is. Now we've got the starting grid, right? So however you finish in those times, your first, your second, they call it P1, P2, you're in position 2, P3, 4, all the way down to 10. That 11 through, what would that be, 16?
15.
Is those 5 drivers that were out in Q2. And then the last 5 grid spots are those 5 drivers that were out in Q1. Now, the only time that can switch up, and we will start to see that later in the season, but as we talked about with Charles, who's already taken, some new units, and now he only has one more change before he gets a penalty. You go through all of qualifying and everybody sets their spot. If you have a penalty for changing components or something else happens after qualifying, that's when your grid drop penalty comes in. So you might, again, have started in P2. It might reflect as P2, but maybe now you're starting P10 or P11. So we will start to see that more as the season goes on, where they may have qualified one way, but because of penalties, they now have a grid drop. So they might be starting further back than what you thought. So that's where there will be a slight change in grids. But that is basically qualifying in a nutshell.
Well, that's good to know too, to understand too that your times reset, because that makes me understand a little better, because I was wondering why Esteban in Q2, his time was so much better. Um, when I saw it, and it was like, oh, even though it wasn't actually faster than the other, just when I looked at the time, they counted the time that was in Q3 because he was in Q3. So
Yes,
that makes sense.
exactly. And just because, like, say you set your fastest lap, you're in Q3 and you set your fastest lap the very first time you're doing a fast lap, right? A fast run around the track. If your second time doing a fast run isn't as high, it doesn't mean now you have that slower time. You keep whatever your fastest time is during that 12 minutes or the 15 minutes or the 18 minutes. It's going to stay with your fastest time. So it's not like, shoot, I did a slower time, now I'm dropping. No, you keep your fastest time.
But you want your fastest time. You want to make it to Q3, but you want your fastest time in Q3, not in Q1.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah, so strategy is still strategy in qualifying. So.
Yes, absolutely, because it's your tires, right? So you've got all of that, and then again, that's why you will see some of those drivers that might be up in the top, 1, 2, 3, 4 positions. They might go just sit in the pits, because even if several drivers do better than them, like they know, like a Red Bull knows, like a Haas may not come up and knock them down. You're not going to fall below the 15th spot, in Q1. So go let it rest and look at your data and figure out what you want to do for Q2. But it's clearly an important part of the race weekend, because it sets your starting grid, and the starting grid, especially in some tracks like Monaco, where overtaking is not that easy, where you start is vital. So it's an important aspect of race weekend, and I just kind of wanted to go over it, really quickly. And we'll, like I said, we'll talk about some of the other aspects of sprint and whatever they're going to do in Imola. We'll figure that out. But the majority of our weekends, that's how it is.
Yeah, and then we'll have more like this grid basics. We can use this, in our weeks in between races, that we could find other stuff. Like I said, that article I keep mentioning had a bunch of really neat rules that I learned. And if hopefully our listeners can submit some questions through our social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook. And if not, then I'll just keep asking questions, because as I'm learning, I'm gonna keep pestering you with questions. All right. Well, we've only got a few minutes left, so we wanted to cover a few things beyond the grid. There's a lot of cool stuff that happened over this last week. It was International Women's Day. Did you know, aside from all the support and all the races, did you know that is a national holiday here in Germany, and you get it off from work?
I did not. I did not. It wasn't really. Yeah, we had the basic little messages at work, but that was about it. I think that's really cool that Germany has that as a national holiday.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm pretty sure it's national. I know here in Berlin, you get off because like stores were closed, the government's closed, like even the grocery store was closed. So, but it was neat to see a lot of support with the F1 drivers and their races, the teams, and F1 as a whole, and the teams and drivers putting out support. I love seeing that. We posted on our page, all of you being so great on our social media.
I think I really think it's a very important day. And I think especially, and we won't get into like what's happening around the world, but when women support each other, when women lift each other up, we do enact change. And I loved to see all of the teams talking about the women drivers that are part of their academies or part of their teams, just supporting the women that even work off the track in their organizations, that run their accounting or their electronics department or their social media, whatever it is. Like, it was so awesome to see all of the teams supporting that. And I feel like we're seeing that more and more, for sure, in the launches this year. Alpine with their Race Her performance, or Race Her academy or group, whatever
Yeah.
they're calling that, with the young girls that they introduced. Um, and then Ferrari, including their, women drivers, and so many other teams. Like, I don't want to just call those two out, because Williams did the same thing with Jamie Chadwick. And so I think it's really exciting, and there is a lot of room for growth in that area. So I hope it continues. I hope it's not really just a one day thing. I hope that they continue to really get out there and promote it.
I think what we're seeing, it's more, people realizing it's not just a man's sport. So I think
Right.
it's she loves the grid. It's going to help pushing it as well, right?
Exactly.
Let's see, what else do we have before we sign off today? Oh, Gunther's new book, and one of your favorite principles.
Gunther. Yeah, so Gunther's new book, I think, is Surviving to Drive. Haas announced that he was doing signed copies, and you could pre-order those. I tried to pre-order mine, but for some reason I kept getting a error, even though there were no stinking errors on my on my page. So I might need to go back and try that again. But yeah, I just love Gunther. So throwing a little plug out there for his upcoming book.
And then we started, because we always do other kind of fantasy stuff. We did fantasy teams this year. I started late, so I didn't know about it till after qualifying. So I lost a few points, but so we'll have to keep doing that. And as we share on our first podcast how we met, we called our team the parking lot team, right?
Yes.
But I called it, I named it parking lot friends. Yeah. So
parking lot friends. And if you weren't on our first podcast, go back and listen to it. It talks about how
the context there.
Yeah, so you have the context for parking lot friends, but it's a great story. It's kind of towards the beginning, but listen to the whole podcast. But it will tell you how Claire and I met many years ago. But we've also done fantasy football in American football together, and so we had to do F1 fantasy. I was proud of my teams, but I feel like it was kind of a no brainer. The way the cost cap is this year. And if you're curious, this is through F1, their app, and they have a fantasy. You could create your own leagues, and that's what we did. But we're also part of the more general, F1
You're automatically
community.
in your country and your
favorite driver,
and that driver's team constructor. Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah. So really fun. I think it should get more fun throughout the year. Like sometimes you just never know. I had Yuki on my team one year, and it was just, I think it might've been his rookie season. And he was just killing me as far as points go, because he would never finish the race. So
mine went from, a high scoring points of 130 all the way down to 12. So,
I still need to know who's on your team with 12 points, because that is rough.
Sad. But that was one of those auto picks. I just let it auto pick. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. Let's just see what happens. So
yeah, I will. Mental note for me, I will not do that. I'm hyper competitive in those situations. Like, it's not going to kill me either if I'm not going to be Mercedes and beat myself up if I have a bad week, but like, I am hyper competitive. So yeah, I'm looking at that. I'm watching the stats for practice. I'm watching the stats.
We'll talk about that in one of our episodes too. So.
Yes, we will. For sure.
Well, I know you read something that the Vegas race is offering some new tickets.
Yeah, so Vegas came out and said that they are releasing some more tickets. I don't think they said where. I don't know if they're general admission, which to me sounds like standing on a corner on the strip in Las Vegas. But
I've done that before. I mean, not that,
but not for that many hours, because when you think the race is a couple of hours, but you've got to get there early. When we went to Austin and there was a whole track, not a whole track, but there was a lot of areas for general admission, we were there before sunrise to get a spot. Could you imagine? And I'm short. I'm 5'1", people. Like, I am not standing on a corner behind somebody who's 6 feet tall, and I can't see anything from the race, but I paid $800 to stand on the corner. So anyways, I don't know which tickets they are. I don't know what the price points are, but I definitely will be logging in this week and checking that out just for kicks. So if you were hoping to get tickets for Vegas and you missed out, then here's your advance warning. I think they go on sale Wednesday or Thursday, like pre-sale. So You never know.
Never know. Well, we're coming up to a close. We've only got a few seconds left to keep in our timing. So let's just talk about next week's race in Saudi.
Yes. So next week's race is Jeddah. It's a very, very fast street circuit. So I think that'll be really fun, especially for you, Claire, because you've not seen that street circuit yet. You've watched, I'm sure you've watched Monaco before, but like
I've walked on the streets of Monaco, so I'm excited to see this one.
Yes, same. Well, we were there at the same time, so but yeah, so it's going to be really exciting. But they did make a few changes, and I just kind of want to, I don't know if a lot of people would really notice them too much. I probably wouldn't if I hadn't read about it, but so they did add some rumble lines, RUMBLE. So those are cars that are things that like kind of shake the car, and it causes the traction to be lost a little bit. So it slows down the car a little bit. So they did that in 5 different turns. So that will be kind of interesting because it is a very fast track. It'll be interesting to see how much it slows them down. There were some driver sight line changes in turns 14 and 20. So they shifted some walls around a little bit. And it just gives the driver a little bit more visibility going into the next turns. So I'm sure that's probably a safety thing, but it'll be interesting. And then on turns 22 and 23, there was an S shape there. So they are squeezing that S a little bit. They've adjusted the fencing and they added what they're calling a beveled curve. So the hope is by kind of like squeezing that S, they're going to slow the cars down going through those last few turns. So they're hoping that it's going to slow the drivers down by 50 kilometers per hour.
Oh, so, wow.
I don't do the math, so you do the math as far as miles per hour. But so that will also be kind of interesting. So it being a very fast street circuit, they're finding ways to kind of slow the cars down a little bit. So I found that very interesting. I can't wait to watch. I kind of screwed up every year. I'm in Arizona, so we have spring training for baseball right now. And every year my family, people fly in and we go to a game. And our game is on Sunday, the day of the race. And we will be tailgating at 10 a.m. when the race goes off here. It starts at 10 a.m. Local time. I'm going to be missing it. So I will not be watching it live. I'm serious anxiety about it, but I've already decided I'm going to represent Ferrari anyways at the baseball game. I'm going to wear my signs shirt, and so I'll make sure to take a picture and I'll post it to social media. But otherwise, Claire's in charge of social media.
Am I messaging you or not messaging you in the middle of the race?
No. I don't want to hear it. I'm going to stay off of social media. I might post the one photo of me in my signed shirt at the baseball game. Other than that, nobody tell me anything. I'm going to be checked out until I come home and I watch the race, and then I will reach out to you, Claire. Then I will contact you.
All right. Well, I'm excited. This was our first post or in between race series. So it's going to be great. So all about the panic. Hopefully next week we won't be having so much panic. I'm excited to see my first street race live.
Yeah.
And I get to watch one live while you're not watching. What a change of pace.
Yeah.
You enjoy your game.
Thank you. It'll be fun.
And thanks for listening, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and a review. To stay up to date with She Loves the Grid and get all the behind-the-scenes content, you can follow us on Instagram at She Loves the Grid and on Facebook at facebook.com/SheLovesTheGrid. Thank you for joining us for the ride this week.